organize.
Oh dear.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
There seems to be some connection issues.
Good Lord. I'm sitting right next to the freaking router. This is driving me crazy. Am I going in and out?
You're going in and out and freezing.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
Welcome to Opera Programs Privilege.
Welcome to our live
So
stream.
excited to have you. Jeremy's back.
Finally. I don't know why I'm having so many technical issues. Anyway. No, I just wanted to say that I am an opera singer and a translator and a voiceover artist. I work for Deutsche Welle.
Right.
So as you can see, there are slight technical difficulties that we are trying to overcome, which shall be overcome.
We will. Somehow.
I knew I should have
Someday.
passed it today.
No. Oh dear. Okay. Well,
Hi, everybody watching the live stream. We're working out some technical difficulties. We'll be back.
Can I be heard? Hello?
Yes.
I'm gonna try again. Then, good Lord. Maybe I should have just, maybe it was even better
No,
before I
we
got on
hear
my
you.
phone. Okay,
We hear
everything
you
is
now.
fine.
Use
Yeah.
the internet for
Okay.
your phone, yes.
Okay. So,
There you go.
yes, I was gonna say, I was saying I'm a translator, I'm a singer. I work at Deutsche Welle. I grew up singing in my area. My mother took me to sing at the Star Spangled Banner at the Travelers games. That was our local baseball team and things like that. I studied music at the University of Central Arkansas and the Peabody Conservatory. Got degrees from both, a bachelor's from the University of Central Arkansas in vocal performance and a master's from the Peabody Conservatory. I recently wanted to be an attorney, but I fell in love with my all-state choir director. I thought she was so inspiring. She was a woman and she had always been told that she was never going to be a choir director. And I was like, I want to be a choir director. And then during my studies, I got more into opera. The student of mine recommended that I listen to some Renee Fleming recordings. And after that, I guess I kind of caught the bug. My first, as far as coming to Europe, I came here first to kind of, I guess, find myself. I went to France. My mother had been an exchange student coordinator, and we had a former student who was living in France. And I was going to stay with him, but he moved, long story. But I was there for about half a year. And then I moved to Berlin. I hitchhiked here actually with a friend. And just, I loved the city right away. And there were just so many more opportunities. I've been here since 2014. And yeah, I would just like to kind of go around and have people introduce themselves, talking a little bit about, how they got into music. Did they come from musical families? Did they grow up singing in school choirs or church, and those kinds of things. So whoever would like to jump in first.
Why don't you call out a name?
Ronnita, why don't you go ahead?
Oh man. Okay. Let's see. How I got into music. Well, I wanted to be an astrophysicist because I love science so much and often am more comfortable with a book in my hand or learning about the composition of stars and gases and everything. But I had a crush. There was a cute guy and he was in chorus. And I found out that he was in chorus and I had an elective free during my coursework. And so I joined chorus just to be near him. But teacher got wind that perhaps there's a voice in there and made me sing the solo at a Christmas concert. And that was kind of the beginning of the end at that point. So it came about as a crush. I had no intention of being a musician at all. What else do I need to tell? went to school, went to University of South Florida, liberal arts degree, and then went on to Manhattan School of Music and Juilliard, and then LA Opera, and then from there, a crazy audition in San Francisco landed me in Berlin from working with Anna Runnels. So there I am, and there I've been, and from there I've been many places. That's my short story.
All righty, and a good story it is. How about Calvin? You wanna give us your kind
Sure.
of bio?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the church, and I was always a performer. My mom, bless her heart, she started me off in dance and acting, and I always had the theater bug. And then from there, I went to North Carolina School of the Arts for my undergrad, and from undergrad, I went directly to um, my master's program in Italy. And then I went to New World School of the Arts in Miami, Florida, where I'm from. I was born in New York, but raised in Miami. And from there, I auditioned for the Houston Grand Opera and didn't know what I was getting into, and got hired for the Porgy and Bess tour. And that's how everything started. Uh, I was wonderful I was happy singing leader and art song and stuff like that. And when I saw that Porgy and Bess from Houston Grand, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Because it was so fabulous. And then the ball started rolling, and from Porgy and Bess, I got other jobs, Turandot's and Giovanni's and Tales of Hoffmann and stuff like that. And then I moved to Germany, and I've been here for 7 years now, and I love it, and I don't regret moving from America to here. So I love it. That's my story right now.
Okay. What, Julius? You wanna tell us what your story is? 'Cause you have a musical theater background, right?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. Well, my father's a conductor composer, and so he's doing stuff all the time. And my mom was a singer, so obviously I ended up being in music, not necessarily by choice, but that's just how it happened. And so I always grew in choir and stuff in school, all state, all New England, all that everybody else did. I also took dance when I was in high school. Then I went to NYU for musical theater. I went to Berklee College of Music for writing and production. And then I went to the Boston Conservatory for opera vocal performance. And then not soon after I finished that, I came out to Europe, just spontaneously started teaching English, ended up singing and dancing on cruise ships, also musicals. I've done a couple of operas as well. So I've kind of run the whole gamut of the entertainment sphere.
Okay. And then what about Chantale?
Unmuting. Hi, I'm Chantale Nurse, soprano. I'm from Montreal, Canada, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And so I grew up there, and I was not going to be a singer, though I wanted to be a singer since I was really young. I wanted to be a pop singer. But then I was like, okay, that's not a viable career path. So I was going to be a doctor. So I did a bachelor's of science in psychology. I was really interested in psychology, but music was always part of my life. And I started taking voice lessons with a classically trained singer, and the voice just sort of opened up, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, okay, I can maybe do this. I could maybe sing this type of amazing music that could just hit me to the core without even knowing what the song was about. So I was seduced by some of that music that she exposed me to. And so I took some lessons, and then I did a second bachelor's. So I did a bachelor's of fine arts in music at Concordia in Montreal. Then I got into the conservatory in Toronto, the Glen Gould School. I did an artist diploma. From there, I got into the young artist program back in Montreal at the Atelier Lyrique. So I did 2 years there. and mainly worked in Canada, mainly in Quebec. And yeah, I've been to Europe a couple of times. I won a few competitions, getting opportunities to do some audition tours, but it was always pretty obvious that if you're not living in Europe, it's more difficult to, unless you get that really great gig right beforehand, you're just doing like a sort of blind audition, then it was a bit more difficult for them to be like, oh, come back, or maybe we'll think of you, sort of thing, if you're not living there. So I thought to myself, okay, let's give it another shot. I came back in 2017, just for like 2.5 months, and I came back to Berlin actually, and really loved the vibe here. And then I decided to come back again in 2018 for a bit longer to see how it was. Still enjoyed it a lot, did auditions, made some contacts with some beautiful people. And yeah, and then I decided to sort of make it my place in 2019. So it's been on and off with Berlin for almost 3 years now. But yeah, here to stay for now. So that's
okay. And then we have Leah.
Hello. So I have always been the singer in my family. I've always sung. My family teases me and says that I have never done anything else, and I've never had a real job because I haven't. I've always been lucky enough to make money singing since I was young. So I went to Morgan State University for my undergraduate degree in music, and then I went to Yale School of Music for my master's degree. And then I went to the Young Artist program at Washington National Opera. And then I transitioned from mezzo to soprano while I was in that program. I miss mezzo rep. And, and then I was accepted into the Lindemann program at the Met. And I just finished that program in May of this year. So I am currently in my first German contract here in Munich at the Staatsoper. So I'm the newbie of the group, I would say, but I'm very excited to learn from you all and get some insight about the German, way. And I'm planning to be here for quite a bit of time. So I think I'll get a crash course. I should be in Berlin to sing also this season. So it'll be nice to learn a lot. So.
Okay, and other than that, it's Raehann, right?
That's right. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see all of you. I'm also a mezzo-soprano. I grew up kind of all over the world. My family's Jamaican, but we moved around a bit. So my mom went back to school when I was in high school, and she went back to study music education. So since I didn't have a babysitter and they didn't want to leave me alone, I went with her every day to school during the summer. And I would just stay in the fine arts library and listen to lots and lots of music. I would watch musicals, and eventually that turned into watching some operas. So then that's how I first caught the bug. I ended up going to the same university, University of Texas at Arlington, for my undergrad. And then I went to Manhattan School of Music for grad school. Then did the young artist life for a few programs in the States. And then I wasn't having the career that I wanted to have. So I took an opportunity to do a Porgy and Bess tour in Europe. And I think it was 8 weeks. That's where I met Calvin. He was my husband during the tour. And so while we were there, I saved every single dollar that we earned so that I could stay in Europe for a few months afterwards and do a lot of competitions. I think I had 2 months that I designated for my intensive Europe period to, throw what I could at the universe and see what landed. And fortunately, that opportunity, I was fortunate to win the Hilde Tzadek competition in Vienna, a competition in Istanbul, some in Italy, and different things. And so literally the next 4 years of work came from all of those competitions that I was fortunate to win. So that's kind of how my career started in Europe. Yeah, and then I'm predominantly in Belgium at Opera of Vlaanderen. That's where my first ensemble position was. So I'm there often, and then most of my experience in Germany has been as an Einspringer. So yeah, but then I've done a few contracts as well. So most of my experiences throughout Europe and a little bit in Germany, and more coming up.
Okay. Well, the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually more of kind of a logistical thing. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of younger singers are going to be watching this, being like, oh, maybe I want to go to Europe and sing, and et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to ask questions about this kind of trifecta that kind of exists. When you come here, right, you know, before you're thinking usually about auditioning or anything like that, this is assuming, right, I guess, if you don't necessarily have a work when you get here, but even if you do, there's kind of this trifecta of the place you're gonna stay, the residency permit, and the job, right? And if you kind of don't have those things kind of worked out, it's really, really difficult to kind of get set up here. You kind of end up kind of chasing your own tails. I wanted to ask if anybody had any difficulties with getting a residency permit or finding a place to live. For example, I work with a Black woman who told me a story that she was approved for an apartment, and they were asking her for her information, and she sent a picture of her passport, and all of a sudden they wanted to show it to a bunch of other people. Anyway, just I was wondering if anybody has, had any difficulties with those things.
Nope, I have not. I was very fortunate. When I came over here, I have lots of friends over here, and my sister's over here as well. And when I first came, I lived with my sister, and put her address on everything. So and she knows the system very well, and so I lived with her for a while, and then I went back to America because I had a gig, and then I came back, and I had another friend who had an apartment here in Berlin, Marquita Lister, and she let me stay in her apartment, which was very, very gracious of her. So as far as me having issues with a place to stay, I always had a place to stay, knock on wood. And I, as an American, we can stay over here for 3 months and without a visa, you know. And I don't know about now, but back then we could. And so I did my audition tour, and then I ended up landing a job at the Deutsche Oper, you know, in the extra course. Let me put it that out there, to keep my papers and everything, and which was wonderful because it was the year of Wagner. So I had lots of work, lots of busy work that year. And but as far as getting the paperwork and everything done, it was really a breeze the very first time. Then after that, that's when all the problems started, you know.
Could you speak to any of, what do you mean when you say problems? I'm just curious if you want to speak more about it.
Yeah, well, I don't like talking about politics, but when this man who's running the country now into the ground came in, that's when I started experiencing problems.
Okay.
Because the world listens. So that's my take. That's how I see it. Because before that, everything else was fine, and then I started having issues after he came into office, and I don't know why. Because I had the same jobs, and I've been working ever since I got here in Germany. So that's never a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything that they would like to say about either a residency permit or getting an apartment, or just these kind of, you know, initial things that you have to deal with when you come over to Germany?
I have to say I was lucky, but I think I've run the whole gamut of all experiences. I first had a plan, so I planned coming here. So I took a teaching language course in Prague the summer right before I came, so that way I had the credentials to actually teach English, to have like a job. And the one way you get your one of the ways you can get a residency permit, or at least your freelancer visa, is if you show that you have job offers. So I had the teach English as a foreign language, so I just went to the different language schools And it was good. One of them was a Black lady from Britain. And so she just gave me, these letters of intent of employment. They actually don't mean anything. It's like you work for them, but unless they give you work, it doesn't really matter. But if you bring those pieces of paper to the Ausländerbehörde, then they'll be like, okay, you can be an English teacher. And if you bring also your other credentials, like, oh, you can teach dance, you can teach theater, you can teach music, blah, yada, yada, they will put that as a freelancer. So they'll let you work and stay for the first 5 years as a freelancer. And so that was my first line of attack, and to survive and to eat while I figured out what I was doing over here. My first day, I was really lucky because I didn't even stay in a hotel or a hostel. I found an apartment the first day. This is 2 white girls, had a picture of Malcolm X, Stevie Wonder, and Martin Luther King on the wall. So I said, I think they're gonna like me. So they took me, yeah, she helped me, helped me bank account, helped me get registered, that kind of stuff. It wasn't, I was lucky, help. Later on, especially the Flüchtlinge crisis, to call the refugees, that's when starting to being able to register a lot harder. 10 years, 2007, registering any place was super easy. Anybody could register at any time. It wasn't that hard. Now they're really making it hard. And that's the difference between coming now and coming before.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I came over. Yeah, that's okay. I came over permanently for a contract, so it wasn't necessarily difficult to prove, intent to work and things. But it is a very daunting thing when you're in the States and you don't get, at least I didn't get really any guidance as to what kind of paperwork I needed. You are left to your computer screen and your own investigation. So I got it done. It took maybe 4 months to come through, which wasn't quite as long as I had planned. Someone had said that it should take about 3 months. So I applied with 3 months ahead of time, but it still wasn't ready before I had to leave for my contract. Ooh. So I had to go to Belgium, sing for a few months, and then fly back to New York to pick up the paperwork at Christmas time and then fly back.
Wow.
Which was really unfortunate. But got it done. I think one of the most frustrating things was that I didn't anticipate was receiving my paycheck, which, in the States, the banking system sometimes is a bit behind what they do there. And you can just, get your check, which I asked the Opera House, can I just get a check? Because I don't have a European account. They're like, a what? A what now?
Yeah.
Be a bank transfer. So finally I was like, okay, well, this is my American bank. And so they started transferring my money there. But then I realized every wire transfer would take $30. And then every time you wanted to get any money from the ATM, it was going to cost $15. And so I was just watching my paycheck just dwindle away in fees, and I couldn't get the bank account, the European bank account, until I had finalized the paperwork, which wasn't ready, which, so just such a system of domino technicalities.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You feel
Interesting.
like
you couldn't get a bank account. Was that in Belgium? You couldn't get a bank account without your visa.
Right. Without a state ID that was like saying like your residence information. Like you had to have a residence card. Yeah. And I needed the visa stuff to get the residence card. So it was a year of a lot of fees that I was very frustrated with. But eventually I found a way to do it as an expat in Brussels. But it was just frustrating because I was having to find all this information out on my own. So, which if I had had that information at the beginning, I could have, saved thousands of dollars.
Yeah, there is no kind of roadmap. I think that's what was very frustrating coming over, because I was very fortunate coming over with a job, and had someone sort of helping me out with saying, okay, this is what you need for your visa requirements, but I did the Airbnb way. I just got an Airbnb and registered on my Airbnb address, and then was very fortunate. This was before the housing went crazy in Berlin, to be offered 2 apartments. I was approved for 2 of them, and I basically had my pick between 2 and decided to pick the one that was closer to work. But the visa, the visa process was daunting, but not hard until I had to renew it. And this was before current administration took place, and the people at the Ausländerbehörde were just not having any of me. They didn't want to hear it. And I had all my papers and things, and I remember the lady saying, "You need to leave. Please leave my office." And I could not understand why, because they were just like, "We need, pay stubs and this and that." And my work, they forwarded her a year of pay stubs, and they just said, "No, this is no." I still don't understand why. And then they gave me a temporary renewal visa that was like maybe 3 months. And then a week later, someone else from the Ausländerbehörde actually wrote and said, "I'm so sorry. They did not understand your case. We actually took over your paperwork and we have a visa ready for you. You just have to come down and get it." But it was harrowing the second time to be basically kicked out of the visa office, going, "Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to stay here. And I cannot." And I was speaking in German, and I just couldn't explain to this woman, I've been here. I live in the same apartment. I have the same job. None of my information has changed. You know, Taxes are coming out of my pay. I didn't know what else to tell her. And she just was like, "No, nine, please leave." And yeah, so that was scary. And I think at the time, politically in Germany, this was just about the height of the refugee crisis. And I think that, a lot of employees there were dealing with a lot of people, a big influx of people coming in. And yeah, it was just, things just got really mixed up. But I know that I wasn't the only person who experienced that. But it's awful. I do not miss the Ausland bird of all things. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask Ronnita, do you have permanent residency now?
I do not. Well, the last time I got my visa renewed, that was when there were no appointments available. So I just got up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and biked over to the outside of Herda and got in line. And the woman who handled my case, she was like, boom, 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 boom. We spoke German. The appointment maybe lasted 10 minutes. And then she asked at the end, "Why aren't you applying for your Niederlassung?" I said, "I don't know," because it was, I just didn't think about it, in all honesty. And then that is when my dad died. Like, my dad died right after that. And so, I sort of knew that my time there wasn't going to be as long as I thought it would be. So that's why I did not get permanent residency. And kind of regret it, kind of, though. I mean, there's just so many things with being, so many hardships, I think, with having US residency and tax treaties and all that kind of stuff that are very, it depends on whether or not you want to stay there long term, and are you working there exclusively. And I don't know, I just didn't do it. I just didn't do it because I wasn't thinking ahead.
Understood. When
Yeah.
I came to Germany, I worked at the Hard Rock Cafe in Charlottenburg, and they sponsored me. They sponsored me for that first year. Yeah, because it's a big company. They sponsored me, but after that second year also, it was the same type of thing. You go there, and luckily, I don't know. I guess somebody up in the stars was looking over me, because I went there. I was like, they didn't renew my contract there. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then the lady was like, well, here you have one for 6 months to look for a job. And then when I came back again, I mean, I think I had some offer to work at as an English teacher at one of these camps where the kids go and you can work as an English teacher, but it was not very much money. And as a freelancer, I was supposed to show that I had several thousand euros. And this lady was like, and I mean, I most definitely did not have it. I had like negative 12 euros. And she was like, oh yeah, here you go. Whoop. I was like, is this a joke? She's like, no. I was like, whoop. I took that thing. I was like, bye.
That's very okay. Don't ask any questions.
Exactly.
Say
But
thank
now
you.
I have permanent residency since about 4 or 5 months. And I'm in the process of applying for citizenship because I just feel like the world is so weird right now. I'd really like because I think I'm going to stay here. And I wanted to ask, kind of to return to the question. Well, there are a couple of things. You mentioned, Ronnita, for example, the fact that you were able to speak German with this woman. How do you feel like, what would you say to people wanting to move here about the importance of learning the language, and how do you sometimes feel that, particularly as a Black person, that there is an assumption that you do not speak German, or that they will treat you not as well? Oh, here's a Black person, I'm going to start speaking to them in this really tortured English, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know.
I think the importance of learning the language cannot be overestimated. Like learning the language is essential just because it gives you another tool in your arsenal to survive, to make opportunities for yourself in your new chosen country. And honestly, people did not speak English with me. I don't know why. I think it was because the comment that I always got was, oh, you speak on an accent, you don't have this accent. And so people would ask me where I'm from. They never did believe that I was born in the United States, that I am from the United States. And I got that many places in Europe. I traveled, when I went to France, I spoke French there, and they said, we do not believe that you're an American. And I was like, but it's my job, I'm an opera singer. So you underestimating my ability to speak the language doesn't really help, because that's my job, and I take my job seriously. So of course I'm going to speak the language because you hired me to do that. And you hired me to excel in speaking and singing in various languages. So of course I'm going to do that. I think there was only one instance where the person just could not believe that I spoke German. They didn't understand why. And I just like, well, that's your problem. I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, I did not really face, I guess, I don't know, the thing that some people experience, where people automatically switch to English with you, and it's almost like they insist on speaking English with you because they know I did not get that. I think because I was stubborn. I'm stubborn about speaking the language.
Good on you. Good, good observations. Chantale, I saw that you wanted to say something about this issue of language learning in Germany, and how, whether or not it, I don't know, limits your opportunities, et cetera. Any comments that you have or thoughts?
Actually, I wanted to talk about the thing that you guys were talking about before, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Language. I just wanted to quickly talk about my experience moving here. And as a Canadian, we have this opportunity, if there are other Canadians watching this, we have an opportunity to get a youth mobility visa, which up into the age of 35 inclusive, you can come to Germany for 1 year and you can work any job. So if somebody wants to come and do like an audition tour, you can find another job working anything. You don't have to prove anything. You just apply for the visa. You just have to prove that you have like a certain amount of money in your bank account, which is not as much, I think, as when you're trying to prove that you're a freelancer, because you can work. So I just wanted to just say that if there are any other Canadians listening, that's a really great opportunity. That's what I did in 2018. So that was super easy for me to come here. In terms of the freelance visa, that was like a different story. Actually, I was refused my visa because I had a job and I thought I could go for my job, and they were like, no. At the outside of the they were like, no, you know, a German could do your job, which was a bit BS because my colleague had gotten the work visa and then I didn't, and we have the same job. But you can't really argue with them because then they tell you go to the Agentur für Arbeit, but you can't contact the Agentur für Arbeit. Your company has to contact the Agentur für Arbeit. Anyway, it was just too much. Anyway, but I really wanted to highlight that fact as well, that Canadians can come to 35 and you can work if you want any job. And to apply for the visa is not difficult. It only takes a couple of weeks actually. Like I went to Toronto, gave in the things that you need to give in, and it came in 2 weeks. So that was pretty easy.
Really cool.
And then I just wanted to also comment quickly on the language as well. Yeah, I mean, I've been here for a little while and I feel bad that my German is not good enough. And I definitely think the harder you can work on your German, the highest that you can get it up to, it's really important. You can survive, but as Ronnita was saying, it just opens up more opportunities for you. And I think people are more likely to hire you, especially in the smaller houses, because you know they're not. Sometimes they do a lot of productions in German as opposed to just doing them in the normal and the language it was originally composed in. So I think the highest you can get your German up, if you can speak it and understand it really well, it's really, really, really important.
I would add to that. I was in a production in the extra chorus of the Zauberer von Oz, as they call the Wizard of Oz in German. And the rehearsals and everything were in German. You know, there are parts where we have to, you know, speak and whisper and all these things. And, you know, if you can't kind of participate in a rehearsal in German, it's quite difficult. I think it might be a bit different if you're a soloist who's traveling around and singing at the top level. But if you want to get a job fest someplace, you're going to have to be able to communicate and understand in the language, and also just in terms of, I think, the amount of respect that you're dealt with. You know, Germans do speak, particularly in Berlin, speak English decently. A lot of people speak English decently, but you get to around, you know, certain parts of the city or with older people, and in a lot of the Behörden, a lot of the like official places, they don't like to speak in English. I've heard it's actually even against the rules because then they can make mistakes. So when you go to the Ausländerbehörde, they don't want to talk to you in English because they might say something because it's such specific legal stuff, and if they give you wrong information because of the language barrier, they can get in trouble. So yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, the language skills, as Ronnita said, cannot be overstated. I wanted to return for a second to the issue of training. There's this article that's going around by this guy. He's a professor at Princeton. His name is Andrew Moravchik. Have you guys heard of this guy? And he wrote about, you know, where have all the great big Wagner and Verdi voices gone? And he really kind of, you know, lays waste to a lot of the common talking points about it, that it's always because of bad teachers, or it's because the orchestras are too loud or the opera houses are too big. He says, no, that he really systematically analyzes why none of these things are actually true. He basically breaks it down to three big reasons. He said the big one is the ubiquity of the microphone, right? Microphones are all over the place. But he said the second big one is the training itself, because opera, and we'll come back to musical theater in just a second, Julius. Opera is one of the few art forms in which people come into their physical prime later in life. 35, particularly when you have, you know, when you have a voice that is rarer, that is larger. So you're kind of then in this game of, you're kind of in this waiting game. And you have to have a lot of resources to survive that waiting game if you have a rarer voice and you're kind of waiting for things you're developing artistically and vocally. And the young artist programs, just the way that they're structured, first of all, they tend to favor people who have lighter voices, and the age cutoffs are a lot of the time, sometimes for sopranos, for women, are sometimes at 28 years old. So I wanted to ask people, not just with reference to to young artist programs, but very, very broadly, how they think the training in opera and these early mechanisms that one must use to have access to the profession, how they might make it particularly difficult for Black singers and other singers of color to get started in the profession. Kind of a, sorry, there's a very large question, but I think there's enough of a meal there for people to take a bite out of it, if anybody wanted to jump in.
I mean, yeah, that's a full course meal. That's a lot of things. That would certainly be correct. I mean, from the point of entering into undergrad, if you go to a high school where you haven't had a music teacher to prepare you with pieces that are, you know, linguistically on point, that are diverse, that are complex, that are not just the basic, you know, arias, you already start off at a disadvantage. I spoke to a young student at UNT that had a conversation with the faculty who was determining who would get into the undergrad. And he said, we don't want people who just sing songs from the 30 Italian arias and songs. We want people who sing esoteric, unique pieces. And, you know, of course, they lived in an area that had a lot of underprivileged schools that are predominantly Black. And just from the offset, that would of course inhibit all of those students from getting into the door to start being trained. So even before we start the training, there are all these problems with inequities. Then during school, of course, we have the issues. He was talking about the training. A lot of teachers who often are not Black or have not had an extensive amount of experience with Black singers may make mistakes when they don't understand a lot of Black instruments that sometimes can have intricacies that can vary from other voices. Then there's so much financially that goes into building a career these days. I mean, lessons in the States can be $250 an hour. If you don't have the money to do that, you already cannot continue to build and grow. Coachings can be very expensive. You have to go to these summer programs. Some of these pay to sings can be insanely expensive. But if you need to get, the whole thing is you need to get connections, and it costs money to get connections. And if in America, Black households hold 1/10% of the wealth that white households hold, you're just coming at it from such a huge disadvantage. So that, I'll just take that first part. I'll let somebody else handle like the rest of it, of which there is so much.
Loved your answer. Thanks for that.
So much, yeah. Anyone?
I wanted to ask maybe Leah, right? Because you were saying you are really, you know, you came from Linderman and you went to Yale. So you were like, as far as the conservatory system and the young artist programs, you were at the tippity tip top. What was your experience, you know, at the very upper echelons of, you know, the training apparatus as a person of color? Did you feel very supported? Did you see lots of other singers of color, or lots of other singers of color? And what was that like? And what suggestions do you have, if any, about how these institutions could diversify who they're taking under their wing?
Yeah. So I entered Yale after Morgan State, and Morgan State is a historically Black university. So I left Morgan feeling very empowered as a Black woman and as a Black singer, and I can do this. Like, there wasn't anything I didn't feel like I could do. And so I got to Yale, and Yale School of Music, well, the opera program is 16 singers in the entire program, and they build the operas around who they have in the program. But in this opera program and also in the entire School of Music, I was the only Black woman. And, you know, in the program, there was one other Black singer when I entered, but in my second year, I was still the only Black woman for my 2 years there. So it was really socially isolating for me. And, you know, every now and then in class, they would speak about a certain topic and someone would look, you know, they would look over at me as if I needed to answer for everyone. I'm coming from Morgan, like, I can't answer for all Black people. You know what I mean? Like, I'm coming with that sort of like, no, you're not putting that on me. You know, what I will say about Yale is that no one ever made me feel like an other. I felt like an other because just because I was the only, but no one went out of their way to make me feel crappy. If I can say that, I really appreciate that about that program. And they are known for doing that for their alums. I've spoken to many alums who are Brown and they feel the same way. Then I went to Washington. Washington is also a very inclusive program. Whenever you look at their roster every season, there's 2 to 3 Black people coming in the program. And I'd say that's a nice amount, especially for a major program, because you can't say the same for others. And when I went on to Lindemann, that sure as heck was not the case. I was the only Black woman there while I was there. Previous to me, there was one Black woman in the program for a bit. I think previous to her, I don't even know when the last time there was someone Black. I don't remember, rather. Lindemann for me after Washington, yeah, I for several reasons, you know, it's the Met. So you have these expectations of yourself that you place, and it's like, you know, you're constantly questioning yourself. If this was a mistake, did they mean to accept me? Am I supposed to be here? You know, just that stupid doubt that sort of gets in there. But I will say some of those structures are not as warm and welcoming to Brown people. And I didn't feel my most comfortable, certainly my first season. I did not. But we opened my second season with that Porgy, and that completely changed my experience. And that's not to say I didn't have great experiences with people, because I did meet some amazing people at that company. I'm going back and I look forward to seeing them this season. But there's just nothing like being around, no matter how old you get, there's nothing like being around people who are you and who get you. There's nothing like it. So I will say I have been spoiled in some ways. And I mean, I blame my parents and their upbringing, because I've always been so comfortable in my Blackness that I've never there's never been like a question of like, how do I put this? Yes, we question if we belong somewhere, but like I've just been so comfortable in it. So even if I am the only one, I'm okay with, in a way, I'm okay with it, because I love being me. I love being Black. You know what I hope that makes sense. But what I will say is I had a look at the incoming class of Lindemann, and I don't know what happened in the last few months, but there are 3 Black singers entering that program this fall. And I literally screamed when I saw it. So I like to believe that is due to all of the discussions and the actions that are taking place as a result of everything that has happened in the last few months. And I'm happy about it. If that's what it took, I'm happy about it. Because it was about time that they caught up, because Lindemann and other programs are just not known for churning out a bunch of Black singers. So if I had any advice, it would just be to companies to just do it. That's all there is. There's no discussion to be had. Just, if you want to change things, bring in Black singers. Just do it. Like in Washington, it's normal. It's not something strange. It's just what it is. So that's what I want it to be. I want it to just be the way that it is. So my experience has been very lucky, and I'm grateful for that. Sure.
Okay, thanks for sharing all of that. Did anyone else have any comments about what their experiences were? Training, again, we're at this moment focusing more particularly on, I guess, operatic training, where they felt like they were running into running into expectations. Maybe they were even unspoken. For example, I sing a lot of Lied. I do these Liederabende with Bonnie Wagner, fantastic pianist. But there's this great legacy of these fantastic divas, right? Leontine Price and Grace Bunbury and Shirley Verrett and Martina Arroyo. But it's like this glass ceiling isn't broken, but it's in very like particular repertoire. Like Black women can be these great big divas, these tragic heroines, etc. But I don't know how many times I've seen a Black Susanna, like Susanna in The Marriage of Figaro, or a Black Pamina, or a Black like Konzertsänger, like Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. Has anybody had the impression that the kind of the ghosts were looming large, and that the people who have already kind of sung these roles and have, you know, made such a huge impact in the industry because those people who are historically white, that you feel like there was a little bit of resistance to giving you a particular opportunity, or that the roads to getting particular opportunities were maybe not as easy?
Interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just want I don't know if I understood it correctly. Are you saying you have not heard of Black Paminas or Susannas or whatever? Is that what you said?
No. I think there have been some to have sung those roles. Of course, Janet Williams.
Yeah, just very recently, actually.
As a Pamina.
And also at Deutsche Oper, Janine de Beek and I were supposed to be in Le Notte di Figaro. She was going to be Susanna. So they were going to put a couple people of color on stage in that show. Yeah, that with a Korean count. So it was going to be a very diverse show. And of course, that was planned a while ago, not just because of you know, the talks that are happening. I don't know. I don't know that. I feel like that honestly happens more in the States. I'm gonna say, because when I came to Germany, I was cast in roles that I never, ever would have sung in the States. I mean, to be Fernanda is not exactly an ingenue, but she's kind of the ingenue part, because, you know, Abigail is the big dramatic part in that show. And to come over to Germany as a large Black woman to sing Fernanda, I would have never gotten that opportunity here in the States. For me, as, you know, being sort of branded as Wagnerian singer, which I don't know what that's about, but, you know, I do it. But I think the diversity of roles have been better in Germany. Yes, there are, you know, I think maybe sometimes people think, oh, okay, your voice is bigger because it has a certain color, or those kind of things that I think I will speak personally that I've encountered. And, you know, I say, no, I sing what I sing. I won't force trying to be something because of some preconceived notion about the color of my voice, or maybe to a lesser extent the color of my skin. But I will say that I've never felt pushed to be this sort of dramatic diva, but to be able to sing the softer roles, to be able to sing the more vulnerable roles, that came when I came to Germany.
Okay.
So that's my personal take.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so beautiful, Ronnita, and I certainly have had a very similar experience. One of my dear friends and your former colleague, Carlton Ford, just shared with me, he just shared with me an experience when he was covering Papageno, also at Deutsche Oper, and
Yeah.
and he was told that he would never actually go on, because of course in Zauberflöte, where there are these very distinct types of roles. As Papageno, he is the good person. He could go on, yes, to sing Monastatos, because that is the bad character.
Even though that's not his fa.
Right. Yes, this he can do. He can do the black role, he can do the villain, but it is very difficult to accept him as the pure and the white and the good character. So it is much easier, because of all of the stereotypes that exist in our society, to have us play the villain, which Ronnita and I, naturally, that's half of our roles anyway. So that's not a problem.
Or the mom.
Or the mom. Well,
the mom. Yeah.
But I think for a lot of voice types, it's beautiful, this cast that you're describing that would have taken place, this Janine de Beek and everything. And that is so these issues are not ubiquitous, but they do exist. And
yes,
they do exist on a very strong level. I mean, Jessie Norman made a comment in one of her interviews where she was saying Grace Bunbury debuted as Venus, which was, very crazy and very difficult.
Yeah.
And a huge momentous occasion, but it was an even bigger deal for her to be cast as Elisabetta, the good,
exactly,
the virtuous, the pure.
Yeah.
Like that took even more bravery in casting to do that. So I do agree that these stereotypes still exist.
Yes,
it's wonderful that people are working to overcome them, but they certainly still are something that we live with on a day-to-day basis. Yes, even more strongly in America, but even still, as people who live within the universe and have subconscious bias, these are just things that exist.
Yeah,
that
you're
you
absolutely
must
right.
actively work to overcome.
Yeah, I think speaking to that, speaking to something that Leah said, it is sometimes there is this sort of loneliness that you have, particularly in a situation where you are the only Black person, maybe even the only person of color in a house, and you're working, even though it's not your task to be representative of, no ethnicity is a monolith, no person, that doesn't exist. But to sort of quietly and valiantly fight to push these boundaries of, I guess for lack of a better word, typecasting based on old, long-held traditional stereotypes and ideas that people have in your head, like what Carlton said about you have to be, you cannot be the good, you don't get to play the good character. And yeah, it's there are steps being made and strides being made, but still have a ways.
Can I add to that?
I wanted, go ahead, sorry.
Real quick. When I was transitioning, I have a dark, colorful voice, I'm dark skinned, and I'm plus size. So immediately the first roles that were assigned to me were these big Verdi girls, because that's clearly what you can do. And every other major soprano who sang that rep, that's what you should need to follow and do whatever they've done. And I remember I was auditioning with like Pache Pache, and when I would sing it, I'd be like, this ain't right yet. Because I didn't have the technique. I didn't have the experience to be offering this. And so I go in there and sing it, and I just felt like a fraud. And so I got to a point where I was like, I want to switch this list up and I want to sing some lighter ladies, because I think that's right for me right now. And there were some people who were like, no, like I started offering Liu and like Desdemona and Countess, and like people were sort of like, but where's the Verity? And it's like, well, can I work my way up? Can I work my way up to that? And I remember for my the Met makes you do house auditions every season. And for my second year, I started with Quando Menvo, because I was like, why not? It fits my voice well. I feel good singing it. And one of the admins, she was like, Musetta, I'm not buying it. And I was like, fair. I kept offering it in audition. And if somebody cast me as Musetta, it's canceled because of COVID. But it was like, I'm glad I listened to myself and stopped pushing, you know, their ideals onto me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can be an ingenue. I can, you know, I can sing lighter things. My voice is colorful. Doesn't mean it's huge, you know? So people have to just change their minds about who we are and what we can offer as Black singers.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. And also just dispelling the myth of, and I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but dispelling the myth of Black strength all the time.
Yes.
Meaning allowing Black singers to explore the full range of human emotion, the full range of being vulnerable, or, you know, being soft, not always being these very strong Titan characters, but the one that's questioning, or the one that things happen to, and the one, not the one going, you know, like this, I don't know, this myth of the super strong Black person.
Yes.
Needs to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
because
Viola Davis talks a lot about that too.
Yeah, it limits the range of emotions. It limits your toolbox to say you can only do this. This is how we see you. And you're like, well, no, I'm a human being and I cry.
Yep.
And I have weaknesses. And I would like that vulnerability to come across too, so that, you know, the audience can sympathize. You know, anyway, just to
Well, right. I think what you're
sort of piggyback onto what you said, Leah.
I think what you were saying is, it sounds like that, that there's a kind of lack of imagination somehow when it comes to Black people, and Black people are not then allowed to like explore like the full spectrum of humanity, right? Because of course there are Black people who are really shy, right? And you know what I mean? It's one of the things that it shouldn't even have to be said. You know what I mean? But I absolutely think that's the case. And on that point, I wanted to ask Julius, because you know we're talking about so much about operatic singing, but you also have quite a bit of experience doing musical theater in Germany. What is it like when this dynamic is the other way around, right? So we're kind of trying to fit into this white European art form, you know, that was conceived at a time when, you know, slavery was, you know, all over the world, and you know, in many places in the world, and that, you know, European countries were benefiting from. But if you're doing musical theater here, that is an American art form. So what is it like coming and having that dynamic be flipped the other way around, where you kind of get to see what they're doing with an American creation? Who is he there? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, yeah. All right, cool. It can be frustrating at times because you inevitably understand the pieces that you're doing much better than sometimes the people that are directing it. And of course, you know, me being Black in Europe, you're usually just playing the Black people that they need for whatever show. That's not always the case, but I call them negricles. But like, you know, your showboats, your hairsprays, your hair, that kind of stuff. So yeah, when you work on stuff and you have the American team there, even when the American team is white, they at least understand the culture and understand the piece. But then once, like, the difference between like a Hairspray directed by an American and a Hairspray directed by a German or Austrian is night and day. And half the times they don't even get all the jokes, and they're just directing through everything and usually ignoring the story. So it's interesting. It's funny you talk about the characters. I have an experience working in Linz that they're so concerned about it's inconsistent when the race is important for a role. For example, they did a production of The Wiz with I think 1.5 Black people. Yeah, they translated it into German and they did The Wiz there. Then that season, I auditioned for it. It was me and another brother. And he's like, we did the dance, we did the singing. He's like, oh, we're definitely in this show. I said, no, we're not. He's like, why not? I was like, we can't dance with the rest of these people because they're going to look weird next to us, or we're going to look weird next to them. They can't have us all in there. So they have to turn what is actually Black into something multicultural, which is also interesting. Like there are some things that are just Black. It doesn't have anything to do with these other brown people or other people that you just found off the street. This is actually a Black thing. And so, but for them, they want to always be multiculti. And if like for instance, you have roles that are actual people with a character arc, like you have in The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz, then those can be interpreted in different races and different cultures. When you translate that to like something like when he did Showboat, they were adamant that they need to have some dark faces on that stage because in that sense, you're more part of the set. You're part of making the visual of this show work because the Black people in Showboat are kind of like the set. You know, you're there so that way white people can tell their story, but they can't tell their story unless you have the set, which shows Mississippi at that time with Black people, you know, with the cotton and everything. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. Also, you have the one Black singer playing Aida. They have to find somebody brown to play Aida, but all her cousins and everybody else are white. And I'm just like, and so I'm just trying to figure out, so why bother? I'm just trying to figure out why so much effort? But it's definitely weird and inconsistent. You just kind of have to roll with it.
Okay. And then I want to open it up again, I guess, to a more, another more broad question. What do you guys think? Are you guys there? Hello? Oh, that was bizarre. What do you guys think about the major impediments to Black singers and other singers of color? What do you think they are? And what can be done to alleviate the problem? Yeah, and what can be done essentially? If people have opinions about it, I know it gets tiresome, is, you know, being the Black people who are constantly telling people, you know, this is what we need to do about racism. But I'm just curious to know what you guys think needs to be done. Like Leah mentioned, just hire Black singers.
May I ask a question? You mean impediments as far as pursuing a musical career, or
yes,
in general?
I mean, okay. I guess that's the question, right? It's one of those things where it begs the question, right? If the music industries, the theater industry, the opera industry, musical theater, those things are, if it's in a racist society, then of course there's going to be racism in those industries. Like, it's just one of those things that goes kind of, I think, without saying. But what do you guys, I don't know, what do you guys think, what actions should be taken to alleviate, no, not to alleviate, to basically eliminate the racism in the world of theater and, you know, the performing arts and in, you know, classical music and things like that. I mean, I've mentioned, there's been some discussion over the economic issues. That's, for me, tends to be what I see in the forefront. The fact that people just do not even get, like, they don't even get out of the gate because the money issue, it's like, you can forget it. That €100 application to wherever school, and then you need to send a video and learn, it's just, you just forget it. And even if you get in, you have to go to this school or go to this city. People just can't afford it. That's what I tend to think. And I think that overwhelmingly disadvantages people of color. But I was wondering what everybody else has to say about that, or if anyone has anything to say about it.
I think the big thing is you need to just have people in places of power and actually have your own stuff going on. I mean, whether we like it or not, singing a European art form in Europe, so there's but so much of getting rid of this bias or whatever that's going to happen. The only time you get rid of bias is when the bias turns to your own bias, because you own what you're making. And and as far as I think Black people, I think sometimes we underestimate what we can create on our own, because every time we do something, somebody else is ready to either copy it or wants to put it up. So I think the biggest thing is that we need to have more confidence in ourselves and our own creations, and to do more stuff independently of the general power structure. But begging them, George, they had this summer, this year might be in vogue to have Black people. So, everybody jump in the wagon, but next, there might be another Jennifer Lopez, and the next thing they want to have Latinos or somebody else. The fashion may change. So if you don't have control, yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, that's basically what I was coming to say, is that you need to hire more Black creatives, and we need to have more, like Julius was mentioning, having a Black Aida, but not having, anyone else that's Black in the cast. I mean, if we're having all of these very serious conversations about the racial issues that we have in opera, because they came from a very racist time period, that's just the fact of the piece. Why don't we give this to a team of creators from that community and see what they do with it? If it's not necessarily just solved by hiring an Asian Madame Butterfly, it's not necessarily just solved by having a Black Aida. Let's give it to a Japanese director and see what they create. Let's give it to a Black director and see what he makes of Aida, what he makes of Porgy and Bess, please God, what he makes of all of these different, or she, good God, we just need to diversify. We need to diversify directors, dramaturgs, conductors, and administration, and the people in the staff, because we also need to diversify our audiences. If art is supposed to be reflective of us and our times and the world that we live in, our world is not a monolith, and having one Black person on stage does not change a culture, does not reveal an experience. And so there's just so much more to the conversation, and it will never truly happen until we hire more Black people, more Asians, more Hispanics, more, we
Everyone.
just need, we need everyone, and we need the theater to reflect the world.
Bravo.
Amen to that.
That's absolutely true.
I mean, maybe this is bad. I don't think we need to worry about the Asians and the other people. They can take care of themselves. I mean, sometimes Black people are out here worrying about everybody else and thinking that, we're at the bottom. And then as we're going up the rungs of the ladder, always having to keep up, bringing up people who ain't doing nothing. I'm just saying, Asians have a voice. They have countries that they come from with tons of money. They can, we don't need to worry about them. They'll get theirs. We need to worry about ourselves. That's all.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree that we are at the bottom in so many issues, but I think I've been to so many protests this year, and I think one of the most beautiful things that I found there was that they were so incredibly diverse. I mean, I marched in New York, and I marched in Texas in a basically all white community, and I was like the only Black person there, and there were all these white people and Latinos screaming Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and I found it so beautiful that all of these other people were also joining the fight. And I just think if we all take responsibility for the change that we want and making the world reflect, making the theater reflect the world, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah,
Well, I
I think it's
that
going to
when
take
we,
all of us.
I have a question about to pose to all of you who are or were based in Germany. Do you find the same sort of impediments for people who are either Afro-European or spent a lot of time in Europe? Like, do they have the same sort of financial difficulties and like the same sort of boxes that they're put into? Like, is that the same issue that you find in Germany?
I
would say
honestly
yes.
couldn't say.
I think that opens up a can of worms because as Americans or even Canadians, North Americans, we have a kind of a shared culture and shared experience, and we come from the continent. Yeah, we know we come from at some point Africa, but all our ancestors grew up within the United States. We are America. Whereas a lot of the people here are either of mixed race from various whatever reasons, or they're Africans from a specific country, from a specific tribe, and they're here and they have their own identity and their own community. And it's kind of new here. There isn't this, it's starting now, but there isn't a Black German, a Black Austrian identity. And so when they identify as Black, they put on the costume of American Blackness. And also within the entertainment industry, that's how they get work. Because to be honest, nobody writing in Germany, if you're writing a show, you're writing Elizabeth, you're writing something with, Rebecca, all these, from the royalty and stuff from Europe, they're writing their stories. And those stories don't really incorporate us, even if they are from Germany, if even those people are German or Austrian. So the way they get jobs is from Americans having diversity in their shows and that culture being transported over to here. So then therefore they, with whatever identity that they think they might have to learn how to put on Americanness in the lens of German to perform here. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a very complicated thing here, and they don't have it figured out. So there's no way we're gonna have it figured out.
I would add to that, I am involved with Black Lives Matter Berlin here, and getting to the point where I've consuming quite a bit of German media at this point. We actually did a piece on Deutsche Welle about racism in Germany, and I kind of got to go through and check the translation, blah, blah, blah. And they're really, really intelligent Black women here. That's not a surprise, but these Black academics who are really, really, really vested in, like making Black people in German society visible. For example, now, I don't know if you guys know, there's an Afro census that's going around that's being done by Each One Teach One. It's because they don't really record race in the German census. So this organization is collecting information about Black people. I watched this documentary. I bought it on my birthday, and I watched it the other night finally with a friend on Audre Lorde. And in the, it's her Berlin years in the early 90s when she gets over here. And, she was hanging out with Maya Yim, who's this important German, Black, like, intellectual and activist. And they were telling the story of Afro-Deutsche. That's I think the term that a lot of Black people prefer to use here. Black Germans prefer to use Afro-Deutsche. And I think that the issue here is that their story is just kind of not ignored. And I think that actually one of the things that I think is superior in the United States, which is hard to say much of anything at this point since the United States is currently burning to the ground, is the fact that the history of Black people is really an integral part of the public discourse. There's a lot of polemical aspects to the discussion that come from, white conservatives who say things in bad faith that are just incredibly racist. But here, it is so interesting to read, for example, articles about police brutality, and it always even when they are saying, yes, this is racist, maybe racist police brutality, they always start out by saying it's not as bad as in the United States. And I think that this kind of like moralizing about, well, we're better than it is in America. But the thing is, Germany has its own racist history, its own anti-Black racist history, the colonization of West Africa, the genocide of the Herero and the Nama people, you know, that they've never paid reparations for that. And this is discussion that's going on now, and they're offering, I think the discussion now is like 10 million euros. It's like, give me a break, you know, it's next to nothing. And I think the experience of Black people here, it's more maybe in that direction, more in the direction of just feeling like when they're speaking about racism, it's just ignored. It's like, well, we had the Holocaust and, you know, that's it. That's the only bad thing that ever happened in Germany. There was no evil before 1933 and there was nothing after 1945. And that's just simply not the case. And, you know, I, for example, met a woman, a Black woman, an attorney, and she talked about going into a courthouse and the guy who's pushing the cart with the files on it just starts, you know, talking to her in English. And she looked at him like, you know, who the hell are you? It's like this Black woman, you know, is an attorney. Like her mother, I think, had immigrated here, but she's a, you know, it takes a long time to become an attorney in Germany. And she, you know, is still just completely, all of her education, none of that mattered because she was a Black woman, oh, Black, not German. And even the terminology that they use here, Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund, that's something that they love to say. And it's like, no, like there are Black Germans. There are Black Germans. There's this great article in the New York Times that came out last year around the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And this Black woman talked about, you know, she lived in West Berlin. And she remembers when walking down, people coming from East Germany, and where she was offering them champagne, and they spit at her and called her racial epithets. And she said, you know, they were the foreigners in my country. Like my grandfather had, like, her grandfather had immigrated to Germany in like in the late 1800s, but they're just kind of made invisible here. And I think that is more the experience of Black people here. It's just kind of made invisible and just acted like it's not a thing. But racism is a humongous, anti-Black racism is a humongous problem in Germany that is just simply ignored. So I just wanted to throw all that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that all of the racism is not even necessarily just that kind of blatant spitting in your face kind of racism. There's also all of these assumptions that people make about you because you are Black. For instance, we have to go to a lot of donor dinners, you know, as opera singers. And I'm always intrigued that very often after dinner is done, you know, they look at the Black singer and they're like, okay, sing some jazz for us, you know?
Yeah.
Or you're a rapper.
There are all these expectations and assumptions about you and your history and what your past is. They have a box that they expect you to fit into, and they want you to stay within that box and be the entertainment and be the stereotype that they've seen on TV. And that's also, even as a successful singer, you still live with that type of racism as well.
I have to say, I was studying La Boheme in a park, had my music out. You can hear me singing it, just like going over the stuff. And like, oh, what are you doing? Studying La Boheme. Oh, can you sing gospel music? I'm like, yeah. And on another note, I know another, she's American, but she's been singing here a lot, but she works with lots of Black German singers. And conversely, she caters to this. So she has her gospel choir and she has German singing with them, but she's like, nobody's allowed to speak German because we have to sell this as an authentic Harlem gospel choir kind of thing. So you have all these Black German people in this choir. Some of them may not even be singing. They're just there while she does her thing. And just for the visuals. And, you know, they think that these people have all been brought over from the United States. These are people from down the street in Cologne, all native German speakers, but nobody's allowed to speak English. And I actually know Americans who like, I remember where I was with somebody and he started speaking German. It's like, you speak German? Yeah, don't tell anybody though, because it ruins my street cred. Because they're trying, it's literally like, especially in these pop and, R&B scenes, they need to, show that they're authentic from Brooklyn. They may not even be from Brooklyn, but who cares? But that's, to give them the visual of what they want, what they think they should see. So that's just something I think.
I wanted to ask a last large question. I guess we should start wrapping it up. Is about the issue of solidarity in the profession, and obviously this is a big issue for Black people and people of color. But I find that in general, in the operatic industry, there isn't a lot of solidarity. And I'll use an example, right? When Tarana Burke's #MeToo started being like kind of co-opted by these white Hollywood actresses, albeit for a well-meaning purpose, but there was still this really problematic erasure of the creator of this entire hashtag. It's a whole other story. But people in Hollywood, some of the most powerful actresses in Hollywood, like Emma Thompson, Sharon Stone, were coming out and talking about how pervasive sexual abuse and harassment is in the industry. And there are so many people whose careers and things like that were ruined, who we never ever hear about, who just moved back because they couldn't deal with the stress of having been, abused or harassed or what have you. But at the beginning of the year, maybe it was the very end of last year, there was an article in the Associated Press where they were talking about the difference between that dynamic and the dynamic in the world of opera, where none of the top singers came out and spoke out against the abuses of some of the top people in the field that everybody has known about for decades. I mean, I heard some of these stories from when I was a student at the University of Central Arkansas, and ain't nobody saying with, some of these conductors. I was wondering, what do you guys have to say about what can be done to generate more solidarity in opera, and any general commentary about the power dynamics in the world of opera? Because I have the impression that opera singers don't really see themselves as like workers, get really Marxist-y about it. They see themselves more as like, I'm going to be a star one day. And then it's like the people that then do make it to the very top kind of forget about all the people who are below them getting really mistreated in a lot of instances. And because obviously I think that this plays a big role in terms of addressing racism in the industry. There are some exceptions, like when Joyce DiDonato came out and said that she was going to leave the board of the Tucker Foundation if David Tucker didn't get thrown out after his racist rants on Facebook about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that stuff is really important. So I'm sorry, I gave a little bit of a filibuster there. The question is about solidarity, and in the world of opera and classical music, and in theater in general, I guess, in the theater world in general is compared to in Hollywood, and the power dynamics and how that makes it particularly difficult to kind of change things.
I think it's really interesting because I do think nowadays there is more solidarity happening with singers, particularly now that so many things are coming out about behaviors that are not acceptable, from assault to racist behaviors. And I think for a long time, this is just my opinion, for a long time, it's been so competitive to even get space to perform as a singer, and even more so when you're a singer of color, because there are so few singers of color as compared to singers of European descent. And I think it sort of created this dynamic where you felt like it was kind of every man for himself, every woman for themselves. And so it just created this very competitive nature where people were competing against each other, but they were also really scared that if they spoke up about something, or if they said something, that they would lose their positions. Because, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people have lost their positions because someone in power didn't like what they said, or they spoke up about something. And I think there is a sort of new awakening also that slowly there is being given more respect for singers, because I think singers sort of are at the bottom of the power structure of opera. You know, you have a few really great top upper echelon singers who could do whatever they wanted, but the power structure came from great directors, great conductors, you know, just
I think
it's just it's so it made everyone else sort of very competitive, and a slight culture of fear, you know, don't, you know, I wouldn't do that. I was admonished, don't, you know, don't say anything, you know, you could lose your position. And so solidarity can exist when there's a culture of fear, because they're, you know, people are afraid to speak up, and solidarity cannot live in that sort of culture. And I think people are really starting to understand the value of singing artists in the wider structure of the administration of opera and the business of opera. And, you know, for a while, I think people thought that singers are expendable. And I just think that some of that led to the culture of what seems to be non-solidarity. And I think it's changing. I think it's changing.
But I think it's the people at the top of the singing world have to make it, because I mean, not everybody, I won't say singers are expendable, but there's 10 people waiting behind you to take your job at any one point in time. So like you said, the fear of not getting your job, and there's also all those other people, they're not your friend, they're your competition. So there's solidarity, but you're also like everybody, you're competing against each other. So it's a two-sided coin. But in order to change these things, you need people that actually have the power and the clout, who are singers at the top, to take up for the people at the bottom. And maybe the people at the bottom need to pressure through social pressure the people at the top. But the people at the bottom, because I've done stuff like that and I've taken the hit, you know, speaking up. So things might get changed, but I get the hit. So, you know, yeah, it's a hard thing, you know, because people got to eat and people got to get their jobs.
But the cycle, the cycle keeps going on and on. You know, that's the thing. You know, so the people who have the platforms, they're coming out, they're talking now. You know, I was looking at CNN earlier today, and they were talking about 100 years ago, women could not vote. You know, so now they're celebrating that. You know, and so things must change, because if not, then we're going to repeat the same thing, and people will lose their jobs, people will lose their lives and stuff like that. So, you know, yeah, and Black women were not able to vote over 100 years ago. So this is we need the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's in the opera world, in the theater world, you know, because things are happening and have happened, that people did not either believe, or they swept it under the carpet for many years, and now things are being exposed, you know. And is it good? Yeah, it can be. It's very scary for a lot of people, because we all, like you just said, we all need to eat. You know, we do this for the love of the art. But when people make singing is easy, it's the people that make it hard, you know, and we get mixed up with all this other stuff, and then racism and other things creep in, you know. Oh, he hurt my feelings. Oh, he's racist, you know. I mean, it's such a thin line, but we experience a lot of this in the theater daily, you know, in our lives daily. And but people don't believe what we go through, you know, and things that are said to us. You know, I had an experience in Saxon, before Corona hit. I was on a job, and a colleague outside of the opera, or an ex-colleague now, called me the N-word. And it took me by surprise. It took everyone by surprise. And so I'm like, but I knew where I was. I knew the area that I was in. So, but when he said it, the owner of the place threw him out, but other people at the opera heard him, and then they started saying, he shouldn't say that. He shouldn't say that. And he's had other issues and da 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 da, and now he's no longer at the theater because the other issues had already mounted up, and that was the cream of the crop, what he did to me. So he's gone. But how many other singers, women, men, for that matter, have gone through stuff like that, and their voices were not heard because they're on the low part of the totem, and the people in the upper echelons who have the power, or the word, so to speak, where they can talk and get their word out. I think that's the most important thing. But people have to want to be able to. People need to come out and say it. Just call it what it is. In the dance world, and you know this, Julius, in the dance world, the dancers in their training, they have a very hard life. The dancers, when I was at School of the Arts, a very famous ballerina danced with Balanchine, told the girls, if you, she loved her artist, but she was really rough, and she said, you'll never be a dancer. You need to go out. You need to learn how to type. If someone said that to a musician, to us, to singers who start later, that would crush us. Some people, it would never crush me because I'd be like, you a lie. But it's the thing is, we have to speak out, and stick to our truths and not get deterred from the past, because this thing is destroying lives and
Amen.
confidence.
Amen.
to
Amen.
that.
Okay.
If I could just put a quick, I completely agree, Calvin. And I think at the end of the day, there are just two types of people. I mean, one of the books that's very famous right now is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And he makes very strongly the point that it's very easy to say, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. I don't call people the N-word. I don't do all of these things, but are you an anti-racist? Are you a person that is actively working to overcome a system that is rigged? Are you actively making moves every day to combat this system that exists? And I think that's the solidarity that we need at the end of the day, is for each person to take responsibility, and with the power that you have, work actively to make the world a better place.
And I think we also have to, one thing, we also have to take the risk of making, and it's going to take the cooperation of everyone to make a safe space to have those uncomfortable conversations that need to happen, and have it agreed upon that it will not impact you negatively as far as your career. Because I think it's a major concern for people working on both sides. You need to have those spaces to say, all right, we have a problem. Let's have a conversation.
So I just want to sum up real quick. The big things are obviously pressure on these institutions to diversify the people who are producing it, the staff, so that in turn the audience will be diversified, to have really uncomfortable conversations about what's happening, and to kind of change this culture of fear in which people are fearing for their careers. And at the people at the top, the people who have the influence and the people who have the ability, they need to be speaking up about these issues and not just kind of coasting on their, in their comfortable existence. They need to speak up in solidarity. And then, as Julius mentioned, then the people on the bottom can put pressure on them to do so. So it's kind of like the symbiotic thing. There is also going to be an opera panel tomorrow night. It's starts at the same time. We'll have a few of the same people, some different people. If anyone's interested in I know some of you guys are also participating in that one. It's going to be very much related to these topics. with some different panel members, some more people. We're gonna have Jeremy Vines from the Deutsche Oper, Byron Knudsen, who's worked at Komische, and Hans Eisler, the conservatory here in Berlin. And we're gonna continue to discuss these issues, and hopefully people will give it a listen and take it and turn it into action and not let it just be another discussion that happened. But it was a pleasure to be able to talk with all of you. Thanks so much for giving me your time. And I think at this point we will end the live stream. Well, it's